Live from Waterford and Dungarvan, this is Waterford at 1 News.
Good afternoon, I'm Julie Smyth. Today's top stories. Cabinet discusses living with COVID plan. A Waterford GP says we still have relatively low numbers here, despite the recent COVID spike. The Foreign Affairs Minister addresses Dungarvan Chamber as the British government debates a controversial Brexit bill. And in sport, a trio of Irish internationals are expected to start in tonight's Premier League. The government is finalising its medium-term plan for living with the coronavirus today. The Cabinet Subcommittee on COVID will meet this afternoon to discuss it. Our political correspondent Sean Defoe tells us what we know so far.
The restrictions we're living with are going to be here for a long time to come. This new roadmap will take things up to next April with 5 levels of restrictions to be announced. One will be the lightest, with level 5 being closer to a full lockdown. It's thought most of the country will be put onto level 2 when it's announced tomorrow, with Dublin placed on level 3 with more restrictions around home visits. The plan will prioritise keeping the schools open through as many of the phases as possible and will have guidance so people have a better idea of when they're at risk of further restrictions. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has also confirmed there will be low level fines for breaching those restrictions.
That is something we're giving consideration to, which would be a set of fines at a lower level than is currently provided for in the Act.
It's thought spectator sport is going to be allowed to return, with possibly as many as 5,000 people to attend games at large venues like Croke Park and the Aviva, with smaller grounds holding 500. The government's also expected to adopt a new system for international travel being developed by the European Commission, while a new government oversight body is to be set up to consider the advice from NEFIT and whether it's workable for wider society. The Taoiseach said that will mean taking longer over health advice rather than rushing into decisions.
Sinn Féin's health spokesperson David Cullinane said the plan can't confuse people.
The most important thing is that there is transparency, that we fully understand why it is that a county or a city or a region would be in any phase at any given time. It's also important that we keep this very simple, that we keep the message very simple, that people clearly understand what is expected of them.
Waterford GP says we still have relatively low numbers of COVID-19 cases here in absolute terms. A large spike in cases was announced for Waterford yesterday. 22 new cases were confirmed. Dr Niall McNamara spoke to Damien Tiernan on Daisha today. He says the trend is going up.
Because we have had relatively low numbers, it doesn't take an awful lot to distort the numbers and it make it look terrible, but it hopefully we still have, in absolute terms, at 22, we still have, relatively speaking, low numbers in absolute terms. But what we want to do is focus back in on the message. And I know it is difficult for people because I think everyone gets a little bit tired. But it's really important that we focus back in on the basics, social distancing, our hand washing and the face covering.
Dr McNamara says adjusting to life with COVID will hopefully become second nature.
We don't want to live in a constant state of fear about this, but if we can get into really safe practice that becomes routine and second nature to us, we can then hopefully stop thinking about it, live our lives in a slightly different way, but in a much safer way for everyone.
Minister for Foreign Affairs Simon Coveney has described the British approach to Brexit as aggressive. British MPs are due to debate a controversial bill today that would undermine the Brexit withdrawal agreement if passed. It would allow the UK to get around parts of the deal related to ensuring there was no hard border with Northern Ireland. Speaking in a webinar to members of Dungarvan and West Waterford Chamber, Minister Coveney said negotiations were at a crucial stage.
The failure to conclude successfully even a very basic, and I would regard a very thin, free trade agreement, which I think is the only thing possible at this stage. The absence of doing that will mean for Waterford, for the South East and for the Irish economy generally, we will have a lot more disruption than we otherwise would have from the start of next year in terms of trade with the UK.
A former Garda who faced dismissal for having a child outside of marriage has said there was pressure from everyone she told about the pregnancy to offer her son up for adoption. Majella Moynihan was charged in the 1980s for breaching the force's rules on premarital sex with another Garda. Last year she received an apology from the Garda Commissioner and the Department of Justice. She says she wasn't given an option about raising her child.
It was just deemed that I wasn't keeping my child, that my child was going for adoption. And even when I gave birth, it was the same thing. It was like that he was just taken straight away, and he was born and he was taken.
A Waterford councillor says the latest homelessness figures show the housing crisis hasn't gone away. 189 adults and 10 families were living in emergency accommodation across the southeast during July. However, Sinn Féin's Conor McGuinness says the figures don't tell the full story.
The official homelessness figures only include those who are in local authority emergency accommodation. They don't take into account individuals and families that are couch surfing or staying in overcrowded, unsafe or unsuitable accommodation. This hidden homelessness is much harder to measure, but from my own experience as a local councillor, I know it's pervasive and it's deeply, deeply embedded.
A Fianna Fáil councillor in West Waterford says the local authority is not aware of any reason why sewage would be pumped into Ardmore Bay. It's after local fisherman Michael Dunn says he witnessed what looked like raw sewage being pumped into the bay last Tuesday afternoon. He collected a sample, however it hasn't been tested yet. Michael spoke to Damien Tiernan on Daysha Today.
No, it was spreading out the whole time and it was coming up and the wind was southwest and was blowing off down the bay. There was a kind of a big circle where it was coming out, and then you had streaks off it going off down the bay. I said it was a disgrace. They spend millions doing the water treatment plant and they're pumping out raw sewage into the sea.
Fianna Fáil's Tom Cronin says he spoke to Waterford Council this morning.
They have said, right, there was nothing unusual happening or should be happening in the bay. Treatment facility cost €4 million a couple of years ago. They're telling me, right, that the whole place is covered by alarms, and the only thing that they would have been worried about if the electricity did go off, something like this just might happen. But as far as they were concerned this morning, when I was talking to them, that this was very unusual, and they were just wondering, was it something else maybe?
Students in high-achieving schools appear to have lost out the most during the Leaving Cert standardisation process. Students have been able to view the estimated mark their teachers awarded them, as well as their final grade, since this morning. Anyone unhappy with the mark they were awarded can appeal the decision to the Department of Education. Lucy Yin, who attended the Institute of Education, was downgraded by 71 points during the standardisation process.
Really devastating. I've worked so hard for 3 years just to get robbed, I just don't feel like I got what I deserved, and neither has so many of my friends. I think the majority that I've spoken to are more disappointed than they are happy, and that should not be the case.
Meanwhile, the weight of children's school bags is seriously concerning. That's according to one Waterford parent who says his son, who has just started first year, has a school bag that weighs in at almost 20 kilograms. With lockers not available in many secondary schools due to social distancing, several children are bringing their books in and out every day. Damien Power, parent of a first-year student in Port Law, says the current situation is not easy.
My young fellow is only 12. He's not a small stature at all. He's very fit as well, and he's struggling to take this bag, lift it up off the ground every day. And we just went through a process there, Damien, of weighing his school bag, and it's just coming in at shy of 20 kilograms. So you can imagine carrying a 20 kilogram bag of coal around school every day. It's not very easy, to say the least.
Sports News on WLR.
With Virgin Media Waterford. Want super fast broadband today? Drop into Virgin Media George's Street and take it home with you. Easy as that.
Sports News on WLR.
With Virgin Media Waterford. Want super fast broadband today? Drop into Virgin Media George's Street and take it home with you. Easy as that.
A very good afternoon from the sports desk. I'm Nigel Kelly. We'll start with soccer, where Irish internationals Enda Stevens and John Egan are expected to start for Sheffield United this evening. The Blades opened their Premier League season at home against Wolves. Last season, on their return to the top flight, United were 5th placed after 12 games. Manager Chris Wilder has challenged his squad to replicate the form at the start of this season.
The start is so important. We got off to a fabulous start last year. 4 points out of our first 2 games, and obviously that gave us a foothold in the division really early on, and it's important that we make or try to make the same start.
That game kicks off at 6, and then at 8:15, Chelsea's expensive German signings Kai Havertz and Timo Werner are on the line to make their debuts away to Brighton. Elsewhere, Tottenham manager Jose Mourinho has labelled his players as lazy following yesterday's 1-0 defeat to Everton. It was the first time that Mourinho has lost a game on the opening weekend in the English top flight. The Spurs boss says that his pre-season has been disrupted because of coronavirus restrictions, preventing his squad from training together after returning from holidays.
I didn't like my team. We were not, in my opinion, physically strong, no intensity. I was expecting much more individually, and I was expecting much more collectively.
Newcastle United have hired lawyers as they dispute a reported rejection by the Premier League of a takeover of the club. Last Wednesday, the club released a statement saying the bid backed by Saudi Arabia had been blocked, but the top flight say this is not the case. Blackstone Chambers say 2 of its barristers are acting for Newcastle on the matter. In golf, Scotty Scheffler will miss golf's US Open next week after testing positive for coronavirus. His place at the second major of the year will be taken by Brendan Grace, who missed the PGA Championship after contracting COVID-19 himself. And in racing, the ground continues to dry up at Tipperary ahead of this afternoon's 7-race flat fixture that gets underway from 3 o'clock. Before that, the 7-race card at Sligo got underway in the last few moments. Sports news on WLR is thanks to Virgin Media, Waterford.